Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Laura, and in this video we're talking about all the books that I read in the month of May. Now this stack is quite small, but I did read 13 books in the month of May. I think that might be my highest amount of books I've read in one single month ever, and that's mostly because I participated in Escape the Readathon in the month of May. Escape the Readathon is hosted by Books with Lexi. It is a competitive readathon, and oh my gosh, I was just so into it. It was so much fun. I was so motivated to try to read as many books and help out my team as much as I could. A lot of the books that I read for that were audiobooks, so I have a small stack of physical books to talk about and quite a few books that I listened to on audiobook. We're just going to go through it in the order that I read it for the month, and I'm going to try to keep it brief because it is quite a lot to get through and I don't want this video to be too terribly long. The first book that I started off with was for an intimidating read prompt for the readathon, and so I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. The reason that intimidates me is because, one, I'm not really into the fantasy genre typically. I do like cozy fantasy, I found out recently, but I don't know, just like some of the higher level fantasies and the romanticities, they just tend to be okay for me, and that was kind of the case with A Court of Thorns and Roses. It also is just overwhelming because there are so many books in this series and in all of the other Sarah J. Maas series, and it seems intimidating to step into the Sarah J. Maas universe, but I did it and I survived. I think that A Court of Thorns and Roses was a 3-star for me. It was okay. I mostly enjoyed my time, but I wouldn't say that I'm just dying to get to the second book in the series. I really loved the beginning scene. The beginning of the book, she is out in the woods and she's hunting, and the scene is just really beautifully set up. I really enjoyed Sarah J. Maas's writing, especially towards the beginning of the book. The setup of this book is that Farah was out hunting at the beginning and she kills a creature that she believed was a wolf, I think it was, but come to find out it was a shape-shifting person from this other community that's lives in the same area as her community. Their communities had a truce that no one from either community would kill anyone from the other community, if that makes sense. The people from the other community find that out and they come to her and say, look, it's a life for a life. That's the agreement. And instead of killing her, they say, well, you can just come and live with us. So that's the point really where I realized, like, this feels a lot like Beauty and the Beast. And it is to an extent, but it definitely has its own twists on it. Again, like, it was a fine time. I feel like I don't need to sell Sarah J. Maas to anyone because there are plenty of people out there that absolutely love her books. So yeah, I've done it. I've read a book by Sarah J. Maas. The next book that I read was Finley Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. This has been a book on my TBR for quite some time, so I'm glad that I finally got around to this one. I would also continue in this series as well, but again, I just kind of have to be in the mood for kind of a lighter, fluffier type of mystery. I wouldn't call this a cozy mystery though, definitely not. The setup of this is that Finley Donovan is a writer. She's struggling. She's been through a divorce. Her ex-husband is, threatening to take custody of their children because she's really kind of struggling mentally, financially, just having a really hard time in life, basically. And she has this book that she's needing to write. She meets with her agent in a public place, I think we're at a restaurant, and someone overhears her talking about her murder mystery plot to her agent and gets the wrong idea that Finley Donovan is a hitman. It reminds me of those movies where it's like the funny crime type of movies. I'm thinking like The Heat or Blue Streak, or one of my favorites, Money Talks, where like the main character gets wrapped up in this crime situation and they just kind of bumble their way through it. The humor in this book is what I really loved. I gave it a 3.5 stars, and I feel like it could have been like a 4 or a 5 if it had really honed in on the humor, because that's what I was really enjoying about this book. At times this book was very, very funny, but at other times it got really serious, and with the kids being involved, I don't know, there was just times where I just felt like had the author really honed in on the humor of this book, it would have elevated it for me, entertainment wise. So I don't know, it was a fun time. Next I listened to The Inmate on audiobook, This is by Frida McFadden, and I've only read one other book by Frida McFadden before, which was The Housemaid. I gave The Housemaid a 3-star. The Inmate is a 2-star. Unfortunately, if I were to recommend a Frida McFadden book, it would not be The Inmate. For one thing, the majority of this book didn't even take place in a prison. There's a dual timeline type of situation, and we're following the main character who has recently got a job as a nurse practitioner at this high-level security prison, where she finds that one of the inmates is somebody that she had a connection with, not just a connection romantically, but she was actually the main key witness that put him away in prison. I don't want to give too much more away than that setup, but the majority of the book either takes place in the previous timeline, the past timeline, or even in the current timeline. Some of it is spent as her job as the nurse practitioner, but very little bits of it. Even the present day timeline, a lot of time is spent kind of outside of the prison, just her normal life as a parent, and she meets somebody else from her past, kind of outside of the prison as well. Something about it just didn't really make a lot of sense for me. I did like the twist at the end. I think that Frida McFadden is a very readable, fast-paced popcorn thriller type of author. So if that's what you like, you might enjoy this book. I just didn't, because for me the plot was so far-fetched, so many different plot holes. Just not at all what I was expecting out of a prison-based thriller. Finally, we're to one of the books that I read in the physical format, and that was Death Valley by Melissa Broder. This is my first time reading from Melissa Broder. Absolutely will not be my last. In fact, almost as soon as I finished reading this book that I checked out from the library, I wanted to read it again, so I bought it. There's something about Melissa Broder's writing that I just really, really vibed with. It took me a while to get into it. She has a very unique writing style, and it took me about 20 to 30 pages or so before I was really just flowing and vibing with it, which is what you kind of have to do with her writing. My major is in English, and so grammar and things like that can really pull me out of a story. I just viewed this more as a fever dreamy, poetic type of writing, and once I got into that mode and that mindset, I feel like I was really connecting with the writer and what she was trying to accomplish with this book. This is a book about, oh my gosh, grief, caregiver fatigue. The main character, who I believe is nameless, I don't think the main character actually has a name in this one, but she is a writer, and her father is dying. He's in ICU and not doing very well, and her husband has this chronic illness where his health is slowly but surely deteriorating. Their intimacy obviously is struggling. She's struggling with love and with grief and with caregiver fatigue, and she is doing some research for a book, so she finds herself, she kind of takes a break, I guess, from, caring for her husband and her father. She goes out on this journey into the desert to do some research for a book that she's writing. When she gets into the desert, she comes across this cactus that's, as big as her, I guess. And so she finds that it has this little slit where it looks like it's been sliced open, and she opens it up, and it's basically this doorway, and she climbs inside the cactus and has this very, feels like a lucid dream type of situation. Again, very fever dreamy. I just really enjoyed this book. She gets lost in the desert, and it becomes a little bit of a survival story. Just a fantastic book. I loved the character development and the things that she realized about life and love. It makes me want to cry just thinking about it again. So I highly recommend this. This was a 5-star read for me. I should also say that while Death Valley also counted for points for Escape the Readathon, that was the start of my little mini TBR for the month of May for Hikeathon, hosted by Macy at the Brightside Girl. It's my favorite theme of all the readathons that Macy does, because it's all about outdoorsy settings and hiking and just adventure type of stories, which I think I really love. So Death Valley fit into that for being set in nature and characters on a hike, characters on a journey, survival story. It fit a lot of the prompts for Hike-a-thon. And so the next few books that I'm going to talk about also were for that theme for Hike-a-thon. Trail of the Lost by Andrea Langford is the next book that I listened to on audiobook. It's a story about Andrea Langford and the author and her involvement in searching for missing people who have gone missing while hiking the PCT, or the Pacific Crest Trail, in California, Oregon, and Washington. So between Mexico and Canada is, I don't know how long, but thousands of miles of trail known as the PCT, and there have been several people that have gone missing. And so it's just a story about, you know, her involvement in searching for missing people. There's a lot of history at the beginning about the PCT and the Appalachian Trail as well, and about through hiking in general. I knew a lot of the terms already that through hikers use, such as like trail names and trail magic, a lot of the terms like that. So just from watching other videos of YouTubers, like Beer and Beautiful Places is one of my favorite through hiking YouTube video creators. She through hiked the Appalachian Trail last year, and it was really fun watching her journey. But anyway, back to the book. Trail of the Lost was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I really enjoyed the beginning, but once we got into like the actual missing people and their stories, I don't know, there's something about the flow of it just felt really choppy, and I honestly just like the book wasn't super well organized. And also some of the things that the author said at the end of the book really made me cringe. She makes some statements at the end of the book that basically if she were to ever go missing, she would want her family to maybe search for a little while for her, but then just give up and move on with your life. Like, that's kind of what she says at the end. And I'm just thinking, these families that you've been helping all of this time have spent so much time, money, energy, resources, emotional investment in trying to find their missing loved ones. And for you to just say like, oh, well, if it was me, I really would just kind of want my family to move on. I mean, everybody has their own opinions. It just felt weird for the author to say that at the end of the book, and it really threw me off. I just felt like some of the stories about the missing people could have been more organized. We kind of jumped from one thing to another, or from one missing person's story to another, and it made it a little bit hard to follow. Maybe if I had been reading it in the physical format and not just listening to it on audiobook, it would have been better, but I'm not sure. If you really like hiking and you really like true crime, like missing person type of stories, you would probably enjoy this book. The next book is like a thriller horror mashup called Hunted by Darcy Coates. I think it's more of a thriller, but there is a little bit of a horror element thrown in there. I listened to this one on audiobook as well. It is obviously set in nature and also a survival story about a young woman who goes hiking and she ends up going missing. Locals just kind of give up on her, don't really take it seriously as a missing person case. And so her group of friends decides that they're gonna go and get all their backpacking gear and go out in the woods and try to find out what happened to her. I didn't really enjoy this one either. I liked it a little bit more than The Inmate by Frida McFadden, so I gave it like a 2.5 stars. If you really like thrillers, if you like Darcy Coates books, this is my first time reading from this author, and I've heard that this is one of her better ones. So I was a little disappointed in it, I'm not gonna lie. I really thought that with this kind of setup, I would really enjoy it more than I did. It just kind of fell flat for me. If the lighting looks a little different, probably my hair looks a little different. That's because my battery died in my camera and I could not find the charger for my batteries for the longest time. I actually gave up on it. We went to the pool, came back. It's so much later in the day now, but I'm just thankful that I found it and was able to charge my batteries so I can finish talking about books with you guys. Anyway, where were we? Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, I think is how you say that author's name. Illustrated by John Rocco is the book that I read next for the month of May. This is a beautiful edition. It reminds me a little bit of the illustrated version of Harry Potter that I read. Like, the illustrations are so pretty in this book, but I will say I think the illustrations, I liked just the type of illustrations better in Harry Potter, but this was still a really fun read. I think I give this a 4.5 stars. But it's a very fun little tale. It's a middle grade tale about a boy named Percy Jackson who thinks he's a normal boy at first and then finds out slowly but surely that he's like a half-blood, I think is what they call them. He's half god, half human. So his mother is human, and he goes on this journey to, he doesn't know exactly who his father is, but he's kind of like discovering who he really is type of journey, and it's really interesting. The biggest thing for me, like why this wasn't like a perfect 5-star read, was that I was a little confused with the whole gods situation, like Zeus, Poseidon, like Hades, all the big three, they call them, I guess. It seemed like at times they were all knowing. For instance, there would be like a thunder anytime Zeus's name was mentioned in the book. So it's like, it seemed like at times like that they could hear and see everything, and they were kind of like these all-knowing gods. But then the main plot point was that Zeus's like lightning rod thing was stolen, and he thought that, you know, Poseidon or Hades had something to do with it. It was like a whole, you know, battle of the gods type of thing that was going on. And Percy Jackson and his friends that he meets at the camp are, you know, on the journey to try to figure out who stole the lightning rod and restore order for the gods, basically. It was a fun story, but I just felt like that plot point was like a little bit confusing. Like, are they all knowing, all seeing gods or not? Because how could they not know what really happened? I don't know. I guess they just weren't paying attention that one point in time. It was really fun though, like all the different characters that they meet. I think my favorite part about this book was the fact that they were on a journey like across America. So it was like a mix of real life places and then this fantasy world. And of course, my favorite part is when they got to St. Louis and went up in the Gateway Arch. So that was really fun because I'm from the St. Louis area, if you didn't know. Anyway, 4.5 stars. I would definitely continue on in this series as well. Next, I listened to Fahrenheit 451 on audiobook. It's written by Ray Bradbury. His name is so hard for me to say. Which is kind of like he's like a classic of the sci-fi genre. It was narrated by Tim Robbins. He's the actor from The Green Mile and a bunch of other movies. But I really enjoyed this book. The setup of this book is that the main character is a fireman, but a fireman is not someone who fights fires. He's someone who starts fires, specifically to burn books. It's set in the future, and at that time they believe that people who own books come up with these big ideas, and that's dangerous to maintaining just like the balance of life and society in the future. Everybody's just content to maintain the status quo. Nobody's thinking anymore. It was a really, really interesting read. And then he comes across this young girl who kind of changes his life around, and it gets really unhinged at times. I fully enjoyed this book. I think Ray Bradbury is one of my favorite sci-fi authors, and definitely one of my favorite classic authors for sure. Next, I read Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I listened to this on audiobook as well. It was narrated by Meryl Streep, and I have to say that I did give this book 4 stars, but I do think that Meryl Streep is what drove it to be so high. I think without her and listening to this in audiobook, if I had just read the book physically, it probably would have just been more of like a 3-star type of book, but she's fantastic. I absolutely love listening to audiobooks narrated by her. I loved The Big Tree, narrated by her as well, by Brian Selznick. But anyway, Tom Lake is a book about a mother to 3 young adult daughters, and she and her husband and her daughters are living on this orchard, and it's during the middle of COVID. So there's not a lot to do other than just working on the orchard, spending time together as a family. And so she's telling these stories about her past to her daughters. The mother's backstories are all centered around like her romantic interests, particularly particularly with this one guy who is now a famous actor. I kind of gathered that he's kind of like a George Clooney or a Brad Pitt or Denzel Washington, like of my time. Somebody who's very, very famous now, but obviously had a troublesome past that you're coming to find out through the mother's stories and about the mother's life as a young actress, because that was her career kind of before she had children. There are a few twists to like the mother's backstory that we find out towards the end, and it was a very sweet story. It honestly, like the backstory parts, and especially with Meryl Streep being the narrator for it, it felt like you were listening to a memoir for a fictional character. So if you like memoirs and you like those kind of like coming of age literary fiction, just sweet little like cozy family stories, I think that you would like this book. I say that with a disclaimer of listen to the audiobook narrated by Meryl Streep, because I really think that's what made the book. Next, I listened to The Wild Robot. This is written by Peter Brown. It is a middle grade book with, I think, just the cutest little story about this robot who ends up getting washed up on this island, and it's all about like the robot just trying to survive and figuring out his purpose in life. All the little animals and creatures interact with the robot, and it's just a fun little light-hearted middle grade read. Nothing that was like super special or extraordinary about it, but it was just a cute, fun little read. I gave that one 4 stars and listened to that on audiobook as well. The next one truly was something special though, and that is Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. I loved this book so much. I think this was maybe my first male romance book. There have been gay men in books that I've read before, but not as like the primary focus of the book was about their relationship. They are hiking the PCT. Again, this and all the ones that I just mentioned previously were also for Hike-a-thon. In this book, we have Alexei, or Lex as he's referred to, and Ben, and they meet while hiking on the PCT. Just their journey on the PCT and, you know, getting to go along with them as they hike and camp, and their trials and tribulations and the snowy mountains and the desert areas. That was so much fun just going on that journey alone. But this book is so much more than just a romance. It's about Alexei dealing with his sexuality. He comes from a very strict Christian family upbringing. They've essentially disowned him because he came out as being gay to them, and so that's one reason that he decided to hike the PCT, to try to find himself, and kind of represents him leaving his old past behind with his family and his Christian upbringing and his church, and trying to figure out what the future is going to hold, what he's going to do next. And he's really having a hard time with that, grieving the loss of his family and his church, and trying to find what his relationship with God means and what it looks like in the future, because he does believe in God. He is a Christian, but he also struggles with what that means for him as a gay man. And it was so good. It was so well done. Anita Kelly really did a great job with this one. And then we have Ben, who is just a fun, sweet man, and he came from a very accepting family, but he has some things that he's dealing with too. So, you know, he's not made the best choices when it comes to relationships in the past, and tends to fall head first, and not always for the person that's right for him. And I don't know, the romance in this was so good. It was just clear right from the start that these two were such a good fit for each other, and I had such a great time following along with their journey. Great character development, great plot, great pacing, beautiful romance. This is a little bit spicy, but honestly the sex scenes in this book were the sex scenes that I want to see in every romance book, regardless of the body parts that they're using and that they have. Obviously, I can't relate to that part of it, but it didn't matter, because I just felt that the moment that they become intimate for the first time, I felt it taking their relationship and their love and appreciation for each other to the next level, which is how it should be. We'll talk about another book that's the opposite of that next. But this is a beautiful romance book, 5 stars for sure, and one that I will be thinking about and comparing other books to for a long time to come. Next we have Fish Out of Water by Katie Ruggles. I'm so sorry, Katie, in advance, but this was not the type of romance book that I'm looking for. Everything I just said that I got from that book, I did not get from this book, sadly. This book was also like set in nature, set with hiking and backpacking and camping and the two characters being together, but this was very insta-lovey, very like lustful. My biggest complaint with this book is that I did not believe in these two people at all. The man in this book, I can't even remember his name. He was so insufferable. Winston Dane. He's like this mountain man that's basically become a hermit. He does have a past that was a little bit tragic. I did like it when that part came out, but it doesn't excuse his absolutely rude behavior towards the main character, Delilah. Now, Delilah was funny. I love the female character in this. She was cute and fun and bubbly. It was definitely like a grumpy sunshine, but the grumpy was taken too far, in my opinion. It's one thing to have some cute little banter and for him to be a little, you know, a little grumpy, a little crabby, and she kind of pulls him out of his shell. The way that he talked to her, I mean, he literally told her to shut up and stop talking because he showed her like the smallest sign of just human decency, honestly. Like, here's a jacket, it's cold out. And she's like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever done anything like this for me. I cannot. I can't. Delilah, you deserve so much better, and I hope that you find it. I hope that after this book was over, you realize that you two are not meant to be, because I didn't believe it or buy it for 1 second. I gave it 2 stars, not a 1 star. I did give it 2 stars because I did like the camping in Colorado, the hiking aspect. That was really fun. There was also this whole like side plot that I just didn't really think, I didn't really buy into that either, that she was actually there and they met up because she was looking for her sister who had gone missing. There's like a whole plot twist or situation with that at the end that I also just really didn't buy into. So other than the beautiful cover and some of the scenery that we get while they're like hiking and in the woods, I'm a sucker for that type of setting. And I liked the main character, Delilah. She was cute and fun. Everything else I was like, not buying it. Not the romance book for me. But if you like that insta-lovey, like really grumpy guy and cute little sweet little bubbly girl, you might like this. So don't take my word as, you know, that you shouldn't pick this up. But just way too many grumblings and grunts, and I don't know. I just pictured him like this the whole time, and that's not fun for me. The last book that I read in the month of May, I actually finished in the month of June, but I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it mostly because it's due back to the library already, and so I want to be able to take it back. But that is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutano. This book was so much fun. This one, unlike Finley Donovan, this one I would consider like a cozy mystery, or very close to like a typical cozy mystery. Maybe you call it more of like a modern cozy mystery. This is about Vera Wong. Is a little bit of an older character. She has a grown son, and she's kind of this overbearing mother to him, which is really fun to read about. She's not texting and harassing her adult son, telling him the things that he should be doing with his life. She's trying to run this tea shop that appears to have seen its better days. But one day she goes downstairs to her tea shop and finds a dead body, and she takes it upon herself to start investigating this murder scene. She's convinced that it's a murder. The police come and they're not so sure. They think maybe there was no foul play involved. She connects with 4 people that become her prime suspects, her murder suspects, and she develops this relationship with all 4 of them, and they kind of actually become this little found family. It was really cute. I really loved Vera Wong's perspective. I gave this a 4 stars though. It would have been a 5-star probably, but I really just wanted this from Vera Wong's perspective. We got this instead from the perspectives also of the 4 murder suspects. And the biggest problem that I had with that is that when we were in Vera Wong's chapters where it was from her perspective, she had a very distinct voice. But I felt like all 4 of the other suspects, their voices and their personalities just all kind of blended together. I didn't feel like those characters were distinct enough, especially if we're being told the story partly through their perspectives. It was cute though sometimes to see Vera Wong through the lens of somebody else. So for that reason, I did see why the author was giving us those perspectives, but I just wish that they had a more distinct voice as characters. But I think if you like murder mysteries, especially if you like cozy mysteries, you would probably like this one as well. There is some foul language in this. I know some people that like to read cozies don't. They like them to be very clean books, so this is not that, so just be cautious of that. But otherwise, it's a cute, fun little cozy read. That is everything that I read in the month of May. Let me know in the comments down below, have you read any of those books? Did you kind of agree and have the same vibes and feelings about them as I did? Did you like them better or worse? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you guys again in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.